Now, as Kendrick Lamar is claiming the throne of the rap game like few other MCs ever had, and Drake is just crashing out to new levels, in the middle of one of the greatest peaks in recent hip-hop history and one of the most steep downfalls, even after all the controversy he has been in all throughout the rest of this year. Right now, J. Cole has been able to come back outside, and from his audio series where he is walking fans through the journey of his entire career, to re-releasing his iconic mixtapes like The Warm-Up and Friday Night Lights, all while promising even more experiences like expanding on and celebrating his most revered album, 2014 Forest Hills Drive. All in all, while J. Cole has not been able to break through all of the noise that both Kendrick and Drake have been creating for better or for worse, he is carving out a place right now where he is trying to win fans back on his side after making polarizing decision after polarizing decision. But now, despite the fact that J. Cole is pretty much keeping to himself in this time and is only catering to his most loyal fans, this does not mean others in the rap game have forgotten about Cole and everything he has done in recent memory, because when it comes to Kendrick Lamar specifically, as his album GNX has been released in more than we were able to through his diss tracks or from his one-off song releases, this album has given us the most in-depth and expansive glimpse into where Kendrick Lamar's mind is at right now in this time in his career, and specifically, one of the themes that is talked about on this album over and over again surrounds how Kendrick feels about so many other rappers who have occupied the game he is the king in right now. And while Kendrick name-dropped people like Lil Wayne and Snoop Dogg on this project to let them know how he felt about them recently directly, there are some other rappers on this album who Kendrick has been much more cryptic about mentioning, and the more we have been able to sit with this project and unpack all of its lyrics, what's becoming clear is that one of the rappers who Kendrick Lamar was sending a message to was none other than J. Cole. And now, before we get into what Kendrick is trying to tell him, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, it helps me out a ton. And now, with the current relationship between Kendrick Lamar and J. Cole, while before this album and months ago at one point it seemed like these two may have resolved their issues, and then after J. Cole released his one-off single Port Antonio, altogether understanding how these two felt about one another just became more confusing than it ever has been. Now, with an album as layered and lyrically nuanced as GNX, the more this record has been listened to and replayed by the entire world, what's clear is that on the most pivotal song to the album narratively, and on the one that seemingly caused the most drama already by causing people like Lil Wayne and Snoop Dogg to respond to Kendrick's words both for better or for worse, and of course the intro track Whacked Out Murals, that on this track, despite all it covers, one of Kendrick Lamar's main messages were to specifically address J. Cole and let him know once and for all that despite becoming one of the first rappers to ever unrelease and apologize for dropping a diss track, that they are not friends and that Kendrick actually despises him. And now, what's really so genius about Whacked Out Murals, and this whole album for that matter, is that when it comes to how Kendrick Lamar addressed each person he wanted to here, he did it in a way where he didn't write the bars the way he did for fans to understand it necessarily, but he seemingly designed the bar structure in a way that would make them able to reach the rappers and people who he wanted them to, over everything else. As when it comes to mentioning people like Snoop Dogg and Lil Wayne, no disrespect to their skills as rappers, but if Kendrick didn't mention them directly by their name, he knows that Snoop would have never knew how he felt about him posting tailor-made freestyle, and in the case of somebody like Lil Wayne, the guy thought that 21 Savage was 21 Pilots. He is just not tapped in on the ground of the rap game and probably would have never even known that Kendrick was rapping about him unless it was for the storm of news and headlines that reached his team and ultimately reached him as a result. And so now, understanding all of this context, and knowing that no matter what you want to say about J. Cole, he is an intelligent MC who is not just tapped in with everything going on in hip-hop, and especially for something like Kendrick, but that knowing his pedigree, he would know how to interpret if he was being called out, even if it's not so clear to all of us at first, as Kendrick is obviously aware of this, although I'm sure he really did question it when Cole said that T-Pap was boring and that Mr. Morale was bad on 7 Minute Drill. And also because he didn't want to make this album about dissing Cole more than he wanted it to be a response to all of the noise in rap in general right now and just a celebration of West Coast hip-hop culture. This was the correct move for Kendrick to make in terms of letting this album become its own body of work that is being celebrated for all of its music as opposed to being rushed to for just one moment. And so now when it comes to the actual song itself, Whacked Out Murals, what's really so genius about the all-time great lyrical performance Kendrick gives on this track is that he is able to take down so many different opponents all here at once. And now in the first verse, which is addressing so much from the moment the track is named after to the response and all of the controversy that went down when Kendrick was named as the headliner of the Super Bowl. While it's clear to us that Kendrick is directly referencing things like these, There is also a ton of other things he is referencing beyond the surface, and while really, there is just not enough information to really decode all of these bars and understanding who he is trying to reach with each one of them. One thing that is clear and definitive is that from the bar that reads "the love and hate is definite without a cure," and then later in the track, as Kendrick says, it's not just him against Drake, but it's really him against everyone. This is already preparing us to expect that, if not stated otherwise, every single MC in the rap game is against Kendrick Lamar, and then starting to point to the idea that one of the names here he was talking about is Cole, is when in the track he says, "I watch him pander with these backhanded compliments," which again, is too broad to say this is fully about Cole itself without any other context or thinking. But when you put this in place with everything else and really see the way J. Cole's 2024 went, where after dissing Kendrick Lamar and apologizing to him on his song Port Antonio, where he was still praising Drake despite Drake dissing him after backing out of the beef, and then on this same track with the way Cole was praising Kendrick backhandedly in general here by saying that if he would have stayed in the beef, he would have ultimately won. Overall, it really seems like Kendrick is starting to call J. Cole out here for his just confusing behavior, and from this moment on, where things really pick up in this verse is where Kendrick says, "I made the," and then his vocals go blank for about 3 seconds. And now this is not the first time Kendrick has done this, as we also saw him do this on his Black Air Forces track just a few months ago as well. But here, based on how the bars are shrinking in their scope, and then they go on and reference events that on some level we kinda can understand, whatever we can here is really being narrowed down on a few people, and while some believe that this was about Drake, at this point there is just no reason for Kendrick to either mention Drake by name and then hold back the diss from our ears. This just doesn't make any sense. And now another theory that was started by Joe Budden was that Kendrick was trying to call out Ice Cube here for recently saying that he was Kendrick Lamar before Kendrick Lamar, instead of just keeping his mouth shut and letting Kendrick have the moment he has been at all year. But based on the rest of this verse, despite Kendrick saying some stuff about old flows later on in the track, there is just not enough evidence to make this seem that strong. And so now based on all of the other lines around this bar and what it's all built to, what really makes the most sense is that what's being said is very specific and directly about J. Cole. And again, when we understand how Kendrick really wrote these subliminal disses to be understood, doing something like this here would really make sense to keep Cole on his feet, and would align with the type of tactician Kendrick Lamar has shown himself to be all year. And now as Kendrick follows up this blank space vocally by saying, "I never lost who I am for a rap image, it's motivation if you wonder how I did it," this could be the last missing piece to understanding how Cole was called out here, because if we remember Cole's diss track 7-Minute Drill, on the now erased song's second half, Cole did call out Kendrick for seemingly living his life behind this facade and fake identity that he's forced to hold up, and with this, Kendrick could be closing this bar out and these overall statements that seem to be calling Cole out for the fact that he can't stand on any ground he believes in, and overall just making Cole remember that no matter what he has done, he still did diss Kendrick Lamar, and it's never going to be forgotten about how the tables have turned on him in all of this feud. And now on the second verse of this track, Kendrick only adds even more fuel to the message he is trying to send to Cole by letting him know who he is calling out by first off saying, "F apologies, I want to see y'all geeked up," which of course in the context of all of this could be directly referencing J. Cole's apology, and then later in this verse, what could be the final lines here that were designed to let J. Cole himself understand that he is being called out in this section is where Kendrick Lamar plays on J. Cole's song Let Nas Down by saying that he let Lil Wayne down, and then a few bars later, and what really ties all of this together, pointing to the fact that Nas was the only one who congratulated Kendrick Lamar for the Super Bowl, which interestingly enough, while Nas was one of the biggest people who went out and spoke about Kendrick Lamar having such a major moment, he is not the only one here who championed Kendrick Lamar right off the bat and praised him for getting the Super Bowl, as other people like Pusha T did as well. So just understanding the context of that, it's very interesting that out of anybody he could have said here, Kendrick decided to put Nas's name in this specifically. As really when we look at this in totality, this could have really been his genius way of addressing so many different things all at once. As we all know, Lil Wayne was supposed to receive this bar, and of course he ultimately did. And for Cole, this could have been his way of saying that now Nas, the rapper who he looked up to more than anyone else coming up, is now supporting Kendrick and his mission more than any other MC in this time, and that includes Cole. And again, while there isn't enough evidence with all of this to 100% say this was about J. Cole, when we cross-reference all of these lyrics with what DJ Head, who was of course very close to Kendrick Lamar and TDE, said when J. Cole's Port Antonio song released, and specifically about the part when Cole was talking about him and Kendrick's relationship. After going into the lyrics of the track and hearing when Cole said towards Kendrick Lamar that he wouldn't have lost a beef, but he would have lost a bro, Head said live on air that Cole already lost a bro no matter what. And of course, that person he is talking about is Kendrick. So now, if somebody who was opening up at the Pop Out concert and who is right in the center of the scene that Kendrick is dominating at is saying this, I think when you put all this together, this really is the strongest confirmation we can get despite everything else, and no matter what J. Cole may think. For the way he has never been able to stand on any sort of actual ground this year in this beef, and for how he keeps supporting Drake despite Drake really being the bane of hip-hop. And also for the way he keeps backhandedly talking about Kendrick Lamar. In Kendrick's case, it's really no surprise that a rapper who is so careful and poignant about everything he says can't stand someone like J. Cole, who, despite anything else you can say about him, is really just the opposite of what Kendrick Lamar represents right now. And so now with all this said, let me know. What do you think about where Kendrick Lamar and J. Cole stand right now, and do you think Kendrick Lamar is justified at this point for just not respecting J. Cole? Now, I can't wait to hear what you have to say, and if you made it to this point in the video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, it helps me out a ton. And now, if you want to see how despite GNX being an album for Kendrick Lamar that is already sang so much, he has quietly revealed to us when his next album is already coming, check out the suggested video.